Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's race C is a very rare race. We haven't used this track in 3 years. There's a very clear meta, and I came up with a really good anti-meta. Let's get into it. This week's anti-meta car is the Nissan Silvia, the S15, one of my favorite cars of all time. I don't actually think it's the second fastest car. I do believe it's the third fastest car, but it seems to be the only car that can maintain really good pace if you choose not to take tires, which gives you lots of strategic flexibility. As you can see, the V8 Vantage is the clear meta, and I do think the F-Type is the second fastest, but like I said, the S15 gives you lots of strategic options. I managed to get a .431. I do think you can go 2 or 3 tenths faster than that though. Like I said, on raw pace, the F-Type is faster, but it doesn't afford the same flexibility as the S15. As per our friend Tussenbach's suggestion, I wanted to show you how I sacrifice all else in favor of getting the maximum speed into the lap. Some tracks are better for this than others, but you can ride the outside of the final corner, aim, and then full throttle to get a tiny bit more speed than if you took the final corner as if you were just racing. Since the extra time isn't calculated in the lap afterwards, it doesn't really matter, but you wouldn't want to take that line during the race itself. For the first corner, what we're going to do is look for this dark mark on the curb after the 50-meter board, and right then you're going to turn in before applying the brakes. Using gentle brake pressure to tighten up your turn in, at about the point you pass these grandstands on the right, you'll want to be fully off the brake and adding more steering. Adding that steering will actually decelerate the car further without causing more understeer, and when you get on the throttle, as long as you're not too heavy on it, your car should continue rotating into the corner, allowing you to hit this late apex and then stay full throttle all the way to the exit. It's easy to get lost and not know exactly where you should be apexing, so I like to use the different markers like the grandstands and the signs on the outside of the track to let me know exactly where I am in relation to the apex I want to hit. Staying full throttle and taking the correct line through this sector is very important. You want to hit this curb straight on, aiming just to the left of the next apex in the distance. Aim for the middle of the next curb, and you actually want to ride the entire thing, exiting so your right tires are on the grass. You'll see that I left a little bit early, which caused the car to bump, and it also tightened up my line going into the next one, which made me steer too much, and that caused me to lose a lot of momentum. You might be able to see that I apexed a little bit early, so I'm going to come off way before the end of this curb. That makes it so I have to steer more to the left to hit the next curb correctly. If the weight is on the right side of the car when you hit this curb, or if you hit the front of the curb, it's going to upset the car and you can actually go directly into this outside wall here on the left. The general rule is to make sure you hit about the middle of the curbs and then exit them late. As we approach the next corner, I want you to take note that I'm only using the red and white part of the curbing. We're going to turn in at the 50-meter board and immediately add just gentle brake pressure. Once again, we want to bleed off just enough speed that we can tighten up the line and stay on this white line between the blue and black parts of the pavement. By the time you get to this post here on the left, you should be fully off the brakes, adding more steering and then gently adding the throttle so you can hit a very late apex. You're going to note that there's another post on the inside, and just about there is when you want to hit the apex. You should be able to do this without using too much steering, staying full throttle, and without making the front tires screech. If your front tires are screeching, you're probably steering too much or carrying too much speed through it. Turn in early before this little crest because you can actually understeer off into the grass. About 2 car lengths before this 100-meter line here on the grass, you're going to hit the brakes extremely heavily. Getting down to third gear as quick as you can, I like to turn in before the 50-meter board, down to second gear before this line right here, and you're going to have to be very gentle on the brakes. Keep very light brake pressure, but keep that brake pressure on for a long time. You're going to see that it changes from blue to red on the inside, and right about then you should be on the throttle, being very careful not to give it too much as you go over this crest because you can get oversteer and you do not want that. If you watch carefully right here, you can see that I'm counter steering to neutralize any kind of oversteer before it happens, and after the car is settled, then I'm going to move to the right side of the track. When I'm in the center of the right lane, I'm going to go up to third gear, and you can see that this maroon part of the track beyond the curb is right about when I start turning in. Right before I cross the center line again, I'm going to dip down to second gear, add just a little bit of brakes, add more steering, and then gently get on that throttle. It's okay to use a lot of this curb, but it can cause oversteer. You can also track out and go beyond the curb here as long as 2 tires are still touching it, but it can get pretty sketchy as you can see right here. Like all the other curbs, you can safely use them and you can use a lot of them, but if your tire goes beyond the curb into the grass, it can hook onto that tire and completely spin you out of nowhere, so be very careful with how you use the curbs. Using just the red and white part of the curb here, once we cross this line, we're going to start turning in, and after the car is settled into the corner, then you're going to use just a little bit of brake to tighten up the line. Like with all the long sweeping corners on this track, it's very important that you're adding steering continuously as you're coming off the brakes. And when you come entirely off the brakes, you add just a little bit more before then getting on the throttle. The throttle can help the car rotate through a corner. You can see me coming off and then back on the throttle to make sure that I'm tightening up the line. And if you look at this fence here on the left, it's because I want to make sure that I'm hitting the apex and staying on the apex once I get to that fence. I know that if I apex right at the beginning of that fence and I can stay on the curb as I get on the throttle, then I'm not going to have to worry about the front end washing out too much and going off the track. It's very easy to carry too much speed or to add too much speed and go off the track here. And if your tires touch the grass, 9 times out of 10, you're going to spin. Lining up with the wall on the left, you're going to see a black and yellow barrier extension. At the end of that, you're going to hit the brakes. You got to be very brave and brake right at the end of it. In third gear, look how this white line right here juts in. At that point, you're going to start turning in gently. You want to continue decelerating, getting down to second gear before you apex, and you actually want to miss this one and hit the next one. I did the opposite. You can see that I hit the first one, completely missed the second one, and because of that, it took me a little bit longer to get on the throttle. This actually cost me almost an entire 10th. If you go a little bit deeper, rotate a little bit faster, you can get on the throttle earlier, and then you'll have a lot more speed going up this hill. I like to turn in early and hit this curb, but then immediately align myself here on the right, and I actually use the full part of this curb here. At the second red portion of this barrier here on the outside past the grass, that's when I like to hit the brakes. As soon as I get down to third gear, I start to turn in, then get down to second gear really quickly, and my goal is to get off the brakes as soon as I can. Like before, this car will continue decelerating as you add steering. When the car starts rotating and it's clear that it's going to go up on the curb, then you can use second gear to exit, being very careful that you don't get on that throttle too quickly because second gear is powerful enough to cause a lot of oversteer. Get all the way to the left and turn in before the marshals that you see there on the left. And as you start turning in, you're going to come off the throttle just gently so you can get aligned all the way on the right side of the track. You do not want to touch the grass at all with your tires because getting back on the concrete will send you completely sideways. Once past the curb, you're going to brake, downshift to third, and immediately turn in. You want to use as much of the curb as you can without touching the grass, and if you hit it just right so your right tires are on the red and white part of the curb, the car should continue to rotate as you go over. Add throttle aggressively, but of course you don't want to hit it so early and so fast that you go off in the grass. That will completely ruin your lap. I like to use the full curb on the final corner. Right at the 50-meter board, we're going to start turning in and then braking heavily. Once I'm completely off the blue part of the asphalt, that's when I start to trail brake in. Once you drop it down to second gear, you want to quickly come entirely off the brakes, let the car rotate as you add more steering, and then back on the throttle heavily in second gear. You want to make sure you don't decelerate too much, but of course you've got to get really close to the inside curb to hit the apex properly, and then get fully on the throttle using all of this exit curbing to make sure that you're maximizing the entire corner. Stay against this wall because moving to the outside of the track will cause you precious thousandths of a lap. Once again, I want to thank Tussenbox for reminding me that this is actually really important. If you completely sacrifice this final corner of the lap that doesn't matter whatsoever, making sure that you just carry as much speed, get on that throttle, and essentially giving yourself as much track as possible to gain more momentum leading into your actual flying lap, it can make a big difference. A couple hundredths can make the difference between a position or two on the leaderboard. I've mentioned this a lot, but what's really important is after you come off the brakes, the car can continue to decelerate as you add steering. Adding steering causes friction, and you don't have to worry about the braking taking up any of that front end grip. So it's really the most important part after coming off the brakes to add more steering before you then add throttle. And if you're gentle enough on the throttle, the car won't understeer. It can continue rotating through the exit of the corner if you're gentle enough on the throttle. I mentioned that you can use the post on the infield here to note exactly where you want to be on the track at any given time, but if you find anything else, it's really important to use any kind of landmarks, even just a spot on the ground, as long as it's not like a shadow, and having more of those little landmarks can help you be really precise with where you place your car. Pay very close attention to the elevation of this portion of the track because it's very easy to slide out, and then when you go over the crest, it makes it much easier. If I had gotten a little bit more on the inside curb, I would have been able to get on the throttle earlier, and I have gone about half a tenth faster through that sector just through doing that. In a perfect world, I should be able to do just one braking move, one steering move, and then one throttle move, but it's very difficult to have that kind of precision, so don't be afraid to come off the throttle if you need to make sure you're not going to go entirely off the track. It's obviously much better to stay on the track than it is to go really fast off the track. I mentioned this in the breakdown, but I actually braked a little too early and then turned in a little bit too early. You don't necessarily want to miss this apex, but hitting that apex that early caused me to miss this second apex, and that made it so it took me longer to get on the throttle. If you can rotate faster by braking later and turning in a little bit later, then you should be able to get on the throttle a lot earlier. And like I said before, I've actually gone more than a tenth faster in just that corner by doing so. If you find yourself understeering in this corner, there's a really good chance that you're just using too much brake. It's really difficult to know exactly when you want to, but coming entirely off the brake really frees up the front tires to do a lot, especially with this car. It's tempting and it is possible to use more of the curb on that final left-hand corner, but it's not very consistent, so be very careful with that. This final corner is also really interesting too, because you definitely want to get on the throttle early to get a really good run onto the back/front straight. I guess it's just the front straight coming from the final corner, but if you sacrifice too much in the mid-corner speed, then it's going to be too slow. This morning, taking Sid to work, I actually saw an F-Type, and I thought that that was a sign that the F-Type was going to be the anti-meta car, but then I realized I don't believe in that kind of stuff, and I had to really think about why I think the S15 is a better anti-meta car. Before we get into that, I want to talk about starting. It's faster to hold your handbrake, your e-brake up instead of the normal brake, and come off that in full throttle in first gear. You don't have to worry about traction control or anything like that, but using your normal brake is slower than using the handbrake, so feel free to use the handbrake to get a really good start. Shout out to G Harris. I don't know if we've ever raced before, but he took the time to say that he was a big fan in the beginning of the lobby, so thank you, G Harris. I appreciate you, dude. The tire wear isn't very high in this race, but it still is much faster to take the tires, especially if you're using the Meta car or the F-Type. However, the S15 has such good tire wear that if you choose not to take tires, you can actually maintain pretty good pace throughout the entirety of the race. One way to really use that is just to go in the pits after the first lap, don't take tires, and you're most likely going to have completely free and clean air for the entirety of the race. You're probably going to suffer a little bit on the pace, but nothing like if you didn't take the tires with the F-Type or the V8 or any of the other cars really. For the Jag and for the V8 Vantage, it seems that most people are taking tires and going to the pits on lap 4. And of course we see some variants. We see some people going in lap 3 or lap 5, but in general you want to try to split your stints evenly so you have maximized tire wear throughout the entirety of the race. Now, I wanted to apologize to that guy for running into him, but after going into the replay, it looks like he accidentally downshifted to first gear and slowed himself down a lot more than he or I could have possibly expected. And luckily it didn't spin him, and in fact it seems to have given him a boost, so I don't think he's too mad about that, but I do always feel bad when I run into people. Anyways, I'm jumping all over the place, so a quick summary. If you're using anything except the S15, most likely you're going to want to pit on lap 4 and take tires. If you don't pit on lap 4, you're probably going to want to pit on lap 3 or 5 and definitely take tires, but the S15 can actually go without taking tires. And since it can go without taking tires, that also means that you can use other pit strategies, such as pitting on lap 2 or lap 6 or lap 1 or lap 7 and still taking tires. You're going to kind of negate the benefit of pitting really early or really late if you do take tires, but it is going to be marginally faster than not taking tires. So if you find yourself in traffic and you feel that you're going a lot faster than the other people, or you could go a lot faster than the people that are holding you back, it might be a good idea to go in the pits, maybe take tires, maybe not, but either way, you should be safe with the S15. I also keep forgetting that not everyone knows this as the S15. It's the Nissan Silvia touring car. S15 is the chassis code. If you see the beginning of these videos, the intro videos when I'm talking and you can see the two cars behind me, those are recreations in Gran Turismo of the two cars that I own. The blue one is obviously the GR86. I can't stop talking about it, but the other one is an S13 that I do own. It's in my garage, and someday, hopefully, we can make this channel big enough that you can follow me in my journey to finally achieve my dream of drifting my S13, and of course, yeah, documenting it, like I said. Anyways, I'm ranting about a whole bunch of different stuff. There's a lot of action going on the track, but what's most important is the pit strategy, and that is why we chose the S15. While I was talking nonstop, you probably saw me end up passing this evolved guy as he went a little bit too deep into that last corner, and there was a little bit more action, but I'm actually going to talk about what you see on the screen now. I'm sorry I keep ranting. It's a problem, but it means I'm caffeinated, which is good because that means I'm happy. Anyways, back to the race. I thought that he was going to run into me, And actually, I think that he would have run into me, especially considering the fact that he did kind of push me off the track. So that explains why I went a little bit deeper and did a little bit of the same to him. I don't necessarily think he was trying to be dirty, but if you're going to have your elbows out, I'm going to also have my elbows out. Going into this corner, it's pretty scary being next to any car pretty much because a lot of people understeer past there, and I was definitely afraid he was going to push me off, but luckily he stayed to his line, and it did seem like he just had his elbows out before. I don't think he was trying to be dirty whatsoever. I got a nice little bump from our friend Mike Grove, and I was able to still tuck the car in, hit that apex, and carry a lot of speed, a lot more than it seems that the meta car can carry through that one corner, and that is a very important thing to be able to do. I also like this car because of the agility. If you saw the rearview mirror in that last corner, you'll notice that I saw cars coming after me. I was able to straighten the wheel, stab the throttle, and it didn't upset the car. I did go a little bit slower throughout the entirety of the corner, but it meant dodging the two cars behind me. And that kind of agility is very, very satisfying. I love this car. Now, as you can see, I rotated a little bit too much. I slid out, and if you perfectly rotate a car into a corner and then kind of get that grip back by gently getting on the throttle, it can actually be faster, but anytime you're sliding, you're going to be wearing the tires, so it's probably going to come back to bite you if you do that too much. Another bit of criteria that I think about when I am choosing an anti-meta car is how it goes toe-to-toe versus the meta car. A lot of times an anti-meta car will be pretty good in time trial, but it can't quite stand up to the meta car when it comes to the race. Luckily, this is not the case. I actually believe the 8.6 in time trial conditions is almost as good as this, but there's no way that I could make this work or make that car work in this race. I did try, and it was pathetic, unfortunately. I really wanted to drive the 8.6, but luckily, I'm driving the S15. I mentioned in the breakdown how important it is to hit these curves and use them correctly. You can see that he missed that second one, and then I subsequently kind of missed the third one, but since I had this slip and because I was hitting most of the curves, I was able to get all the way next to him going into this corner. It's always really scary trying to pull off an outside move, and the timing of everything is a little bit different, but I was really lucky that he gave me space, even though he didn't need to, and I was still close enough to continue the attack. You may have seen me adjust my brakes there. I wanted to put more front brake bias because I definitely planned on diving into that corner and trying to rotate the car past him, but he kind of understeered and it kind of negated that move right then. I decided to go on the inside, stay there. He kind of rubbed against me again, but once again I gave him space, and in the end I think it was another one of those elbows out situations. I don't think he was trying to be dirty by understeering into me, and I wasn't trying to be dirty by making sure I'm next to him going into the apex, so I think, like I keep saying, we both had our elbows out, and I think that was just about clean enough. I think the biggest weakness that this car has is just the outright power. So I was very happy to see that I was now close enough to Patlu to get some of that slipstream. Despite the fact that Brown Beast, who was also very quick, had my slipstream, I thought that if I was going to drive well enough and use Patlu's slipstream, I should be safe from any further attacks. Jumping ahead just a few corners to the final corner, I want to show you just how effective an undercut can be. I noticed that Patlu was definitely not going into the pits just yet, so I took my chance to go ahead and do so. This is only just one lap early when it comes to the normal pit strategy, which can be achieved by any of the cars, but because the tire wear is so good on the S15, at the end of the race, I'm going to have a little bit better pace potential than any of the other cars that pit at the same time that I did, unless, of course, they're also in the S15. Now, I was surprised, to say the least, that our friend Mike had gone into the pits and not taken tires, but that gave me a little bit of information. That told me that Mike's tires were definitely going to be a lot more worn than mine at this point, and at the end of the race, they're going to be a lot more worn out. Now, since Mike's tires are only 3 laps old, they're not going to show a lot of signs of wear, but it should be an actual noticeable difference compared to my brand new tires. I didn't have any kind of overlap, and I didn't want to slow both of us down, especially with Tinsley charging up from the rear, so I decided to stay behind him, try to stay as close as I could, and then if an opportunity arose, I was going to get on that throttle and try to get past. I do think the tire wear caused him to understeer a little bit there, and so I took my chance and I moved on the inside, getting all the way in front. If you remember back when we went into the pits, we were in 4th place behind Patlu, just about 1 to 2 tenths behind Patlu, and coming out of the pits is our friend Patlu, and now we are 1 full second ahead of him. Actually, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. We ended up being 1.4 seconds ahead at the end of the first corner. That undercut with my pace ended up making it so that we gained 1.2 seconds just by pulling off that little bit of an undercut. On top of that, my tires are still going to be really good at the end of the race, probably just about as good as his tires, despite the fact that his tires are a lap newer. We're also close enough to this driver, whose name I will not attempt to say because I do not want to mispronounce it. I apologize. And he is in the Jag, the other choice that could have possibly been the anti-meta car. I have mentioned that I do think this car is more agile than the F-Type, and that is why I went for an outside pass here. This is a very scary place to try to pull off a pass because a lot of people end up spinning themselves on their own. When you have two people very close to each other, it is very easy to end up going into each other, but he was a good driver and we managed to pull that off really cleanly. Because I was on the inside, I had less track to use, and so I had less momentum coming out of the corner, and despite the fact that he did have a little bit better, it wasn't quite enough to really warrant trying to go for a move just yet. Deciding to, instead of go for a pass there, even though he did have a little bit more momentum, he gave me a bump draft, and that allowed both of us to move together away from anyone behind us, and after that, then it makes sense to try to pull off a pass. Not knowing exactly what to expect from this move and not exactly knowing what to expect from him, I decided to go really wide and just try to carry my momentum, and that just straight up did not work. He was able to get all the way in front of me by the exit of that corner. Now, he doesn't know this yet, obviously, but I actually want to do the same thing he did and just bump draft him for a little while to create more space between us and Patlu behind. He defended, which is the intelligent thing to do. It's always smart to try to defend if you think that you can maintain your position and maintain your speed, but I wasn't about to try to pass. So after that corner, I gave him a little bump, and then I just followed him through this section. He was able to carry a lot of speed through there, which of course I like because, like I keep saying, we want to put as much distance between ourselves and Patlu as possible. It's not that I have anything against Patlu, especially compared to another driver that I don't know really well, but like I said, you want to make sure that if you are going to battle someone, you're not going to leave yourselves vulnerable to another driver who could essentially third party you. I'm not quite sure if he maintained the normal line because he was hoping that he could carry enough momentum to actually defend around the outside, or if he just thought it wasn't worth continuing to battle right now with 2 full laps after this one, but he just left the inside open and I took my shot. I fully anticipated him staying strongly within my slipstream and being able to pull off some kind of move, but he actually hit me a little bit too early. I don't mean he hit me like he ran into me. He gave me a bump draft at exactly the wrong time for his momentum. It pushed me so far ahead that he had no overlap going into this corner, and I was able to manage that extra overspeed, and I got a really good line through this corner. That essentially negated that battle and put me so far ahead that it was going to be very difficult for him to pull off anything anytime soon. Now, I'd like to say that I was able just to run away, but he actually stayed on my tail for almost the entirety of the race. It wasn't until somewhere in the 8th lap that I was able to shake him, and I don't know if that's because of his tire wear or if it was just a mistake, but it was really good racing him, and he did definitely make me work for it. But at the end, I was able to pull off a 2nd place in this race. I didn't hit the best laps possible because I did wear out the tires a lot battling, but going from the back all the way to 2nd place using an alternate pit strategy felt really good. And like I keep saying, you do not need to take tires with this car, and if you don't, then I would suggest just pitting lap 1 and then trying to get as much clean air as you possibly can. One final note, this car is fully capable of hitting mid 27 lap times in the race. As always, thank you very much for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be leaving you with a look at my current members. Thank you very much. I love every one of you.